I really enjoy doing Ben Carson sound. So if everybody will indulge me for a minute, you indulge me, Waz.
Absolutely.
All
I
right.
saw this, so I'm actually looking forward to this.
Yeah. This is so. We all saw. I'm sure by now it's kind of amazing how fast our news cycles are because, like, when I first saw the Trump tape when it dropped on Friday, I actually, as cynical as I am, and sort of just nonplussed by most of this stuff, it was pretty. I mean, it's a genuinely rapey, gross, creepy as fuck tape. And, but now a couple of days in, that's so bizarre about this race. Like, it's already like, it's just like in the litany. It's like, yeah, like it was just another horrible thing that Donald Trump said. And, it is what it is. But there's something actually weird in this Ben Carson clip because Ben Carson, who is the Christian brain surgeon who wanted to like restore ethics in America. I really did. I do that joke where I say like King David had concubines and he was a great leader. I was expecting to hear something like that. I was not expecting to hear this on CNN with Brianna Keilar.
Talk to you about a way that you characterize this. You said you described this as a locker room talk, and you said that Donald Trump was someone else 11 years ago. He wasn't in the political sphere. I mean, you were not in the political sphere 11 years ago. Are you a terribly different person than you were 11 years ago?
Well, we all tend to change, but remember, 11 years ago, he's a billionaire playboy. And, now he's running for president of the United States. That means you're out there among the people. You're listening to their concerns. There's a certain gravitas that is attributed to you because you begin to understand these things that you weren't even concerned about before. It makes a difference.
But he's talked even as a presidential candidate about physical appearance.
Let me just say this. It doesn't excuse the words. It doesn't excuse what was done. I think it's abominable. I don't think there's any way that you can justify it, and I don't hear anybody trying to justify it. But let's move on. Call it whatever you need to call it to make it feel good to you. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, I've been in lots of places, growing up and listening to people talk about their great tales of sexual conquest. It's an immature
Dr. Carson,
thing
you said
to do.
say whatever you need to say about it to make it feel good to me or maybe to the viewer, but that's not really the viewer's job, right? To try to come up with some way to characterize this to make this feel good for them. I mean, this is what it is. Why did you call it locker room talk?
Don't mischaracterize, if you mind. Don't mischaracterize what I'm saying. What I am saying is that kind of banter goes around all the time. Is it the right kind of thing to do? Absolutely not.
So you
Is it something that I've ever done? Absolutely not. I've heard people talking like that. Of course.
Are you kidding me? Where are you
people are always trying.
Where are you hanging out that you hear people talking like that?
As I was growing up, people were always trying to talk about their sexual conquest and trying to make themselves appear, like the Don, Casanova. I'm surprised you haven't heard that. I really am.
Don Casanova.
I haven't heard it, and I know a lot of people who have not heard it. And I
maybe
think they were shocked.
Maybe that's the problem. Maybe that's the problem. People
the problem
have
is
not
that I
heard this.
haven't.
Maybe that's the problem.
All right, so let's just grid this out for a second. So he went from nobody is trying to justify this. It's a terrible thing to say, and I don't want to justify it. Now let's move on. Then she pushes, and then he's like, wait a second. Is there something the matter with you? You haven't been hollered at before? Yeah, I've heard people say stuff like that all the time. Because I like how randomly Ben reminds you. He likes to drop these little hints. Like, I used to just be pretty wilding myself. And I would be in a meeting. And I remember the first time I threw it on candy. And I'm not saying it's right. but I hit that raw and it was right. And you're telling me that you have not heard anything like this before?
But
Brianna, let me holler at you for a second. Where you at?
But my problem is that he combined Don Juan and Casanova.
I think it was like
in his Don Casanova.
I think he was about to be like, oh, I don't want to reinforce it. Don is like Donald Trump.
I think he didn't. I didn't think he wasn't sure about the reference.
It's Don. Everybody knows about Don. Don Casanova used to live in Detroit when I was growing up. He was cleaning it up.
Oh,
he had honeys on every block, and I remember one time I was so jealous of his ability to pull girls that I stabbed him. But fortunately, he had one of those high-rise belt buckles that actually went to his chest. And
couldn't let anything go by. I had to get revenge.
what's the worst part is that part of his message is like this anti-PC stuff, right? It's like, get over it. He said some slimy stuff. Who cares?
No, he morphed from sleepy incoherent to like stealth pro rape culture.
Right.
I mean, that actually is very creepy.
He bragged about getting handsy with women. I mean, I've heard people say much worse.
I mean, I don't know.
That's essentially what he's saying.
He's saying he's a star and he gets hooked up. Believe me, Brianna, I don't believe you. I think you've been around the block.
He also for being basically asleep, did a very aggressive with both of his hands gesture for her to shut up.
Yeah,
which is something that I have been asked to point out when it happens to female commentators on TV. And it happens all the time. He wanted her to shut up, and he was pissed about it. And he's basically like dead compared to most people that are on television.
Brianna, I am quite literally comatose, and I can barely keep my eyes open. But I am cognizant enough to know that you need to shut your goddamn mouth.
Yeah, he was basically like, let me tell you something about men.
Yeah, you want to know something about men? Now, I've been having the testosterone seeped out of my body for the last 30 years in a specific attempt to reform my nature, because I used to rape, murder, kill, and pillage. But if you want to talk about men, Brianna, we could talk about men, and I could holler at you.
Hey, it's Sam Seder. Why don't you subscribe to this channel? You can do so right over here. Over. Subscribe.